Hey guys, welcome to the Top 10 After Show. This week we're going to run a little bit differently. We'll go ahead and break that down in just a second, but let me introduce my co-host, Mr. Dan Skip Allen.
Hey, how's it going? I'm just glad to be back. We tweaked the show a little bit, so hopefully everybody that watches, you're not going to see my face because I'm having some computer problems, but hopefully you can hear me pretty good. And like I said, we tweaked the show a little bit, so hopefully it's enjoyable for everybody out there in Schmoville to watch and listen to.
Yeah, and I'm Dylan Esposito. Great to have you guys back. Basically, the way it's going to run this time is get a little more personal, get a little more in with the guys. So what we're going to do is I'm going to break down and run down their list that they finished at the end of their show. So if you haven't seen the 90s action films yet, please go check that out. It's on the SK Podcast Network on YouTube. Yeah, go check that out first with Matt Knost at Matt Knost and John Rocha at The Rocha Says. Go check that out, come back, and then basically, like I said, I'm going to break down their list. Dan's going to break down the fan list that we put together. If you want to see how we put it together, we just finished a featurette. That'll also be on the After Show channel. You can go check that out as well. Yeah, it's still going to be run the same. I'm going to run down 1098. He's going to run down our fan 1098, and then we're going to go from there. And at the end, we'll just kind of compare notes and see where everyone had everything. And make sure to comment yours as far as your 90s action films, either on their actual 90s action film YouTube, or you can comment right below here, and we'll get back to you. So Dan, why don't you go ahead and tell the fans the fan 1098 that we put together on our 90s action films.
And there was a lot of deliberation, not as much as there should have been with our list. Once again, Dylan and I were just too nice of guys to argue about our top 10 lists, but we had a lot in common once again. So we had Face Off at number 10. And I know Dylan was a big fan of Face Off. I wasn't as big a fan of this movie as him, but we came to a conclusion that was going to be our number 10. Now, this one we both had. Surprisingly, we had it so low on our lists. It's irony is kind of odd that we didn't have it higher on our list, but we both had it at exact same spot, and that's number 9 is Independence Day. And we just come to find out today, the news came out today that Independence Day ID Forever just wrapped shooting. So we're going to get a sequel to this movie next year. So you might want to watch the old Independence Day because you're going to get a sequel coming out next year. It wrapped today. And I had this in my honorable mentions, but Dylan had it in his top 10 list. I kind of relinquished because I knew how great of movie it was, and I know a lot of people kind of really love this movie, and I know this has got a reboot coming out, which the trailer looks really interesting. I know a lot of people don't like the reboot already from the trailer, but it looks interesting to me, and that's Point Break, the classic Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze film.
Yeah, and definitely for me, Face Off is one of my favorite films, which is, it's so stupid to say, especially when I literally maybe a month ago just rewatched it with a couple of my friends, and one of my buddy's girlfriend had never seen it before, and I was like, no, you have to watch this. It's the most amazing thing I think you'll probably ever see. And sure enough, every time there'd be some quotable line, and she'd just look at me and she's like, this might be the greatest thing that I've ever seen. I was like, yes, exactly. Now you understand my love for it. And I watched that movie. That was one of my first rated R films that I've ever seen, but I was born in 92, so it'd be easy on me. But yeah, I literally watched that and Broken Arrow, which did make my list, didn't make his. And that's what, yeah, I definitely, the bottom 5 here, I definitely pushed for a bit more for my list. But yeah, we definitely did compromise on, especially those top spots, which we'll get to. As far as the guys list go, number 10, they had Under Siege, which Dan, did you have that in your honorable mentions at all, or?
No, I'm not. I wasn't as big a fan of what's his face? What's the guy in Under Siege?
Seagal, Steven
Seagal,
Seagal.
Steven Seagal. So I wasn't thinking about that as something I would want on my list.
Yeah, no, for me it's a really guilty movie pleasure for me. In fact, actually, I'm pretty sure Guilty Movie Pleasures covered that. If you want to go check them out on Popcorn Talk Network, maybe a couple weeks back they just covered Under Siege, and it was. I think that's why I revisited the film. It wasn't because I saw it on and was like, oh yeah, Under Siege, and that was definitely one that Knost pushed for. So it was really fun listening to him, especially versus Rocha on that one. And number 9, one that Dan had on his list that we didn't end up putting on, that was number 9 for them, was Con Air. Dan, why don't you go ahead and tell them a little bit about Con Air, since you were definitely pushing for that one a little bit more.
I just love the whole, all these villains, on a plane and being taken from one place to another, and all this crazy stuff happens. And you got so many just crazy characters in this movie with John Malkovich, and of course you got, this is the action genre version of Nick Cage, where he was like this big action star in the 90s. He in the 2000s he just does everything, and in the 80s he was kind of in the romantic comedy kind of thing. And it just is so many just kooky out there characters. I think it was Jerry Bruckheimer produced this, and it was a Michael Bay. I believe it was a Jerry Bruckheimer Michael Bay thing, if I'm not mistaken.
Simon West was actually the director.
Oh, was he really? Wow, it seems so much like, a Bruckheimer and.
Yeah, it definitely does. In fact, actually, I think it was Rocha that basically said this was Simon West's version of a Michael Bay film.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just a crazy plane with all these cons on it, and that's why it's called Con Air. So.
Yeah. And then at number 8, a film I love. I was with Rocha on this, as far as not seeing it so much as an action film. But at 8 they put Heat. And I personally love, especially the back and forth between seeing the good side and seeing the bad. Michael Mann directed it, just did a terrific job with it. What are your thoughts on Heat?
Well, I love Heat, but if I was doing a top 10 on Robert De Niro, it might sneak in there at 10. If I was doing a top 10 on Al Pacino, it might sneak there at 9 to 10. It'd be in my top Fast 5 if I was doing a Michael Mann. But as a 90s action film, I don't think so. This doesn't come to mind for me for a 90s action film at all.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking the exact same way. Especially when putting my list together, about half of it was guilty pleasures. Which, when you look at most of the 90s action films, a lot of them are guilty movie pleasures. And that, pretty much, granted, the downtown scene is one of the best in cinema. But, other than that, I really didn't see it as an action film, but I did understand, putting it on there. And Knost set it at 5. Rocha didn't put it on there at all. But it was definitely a great film, and it was actually one that I have in my honorable mentions, which we'll get to that. But Dan, why don't you go ahead and take it on back and tell us the 7 and 6 for the fans?
All right. This is one I had lower on my list, and so we settled on number 7. And you didn't have it on your list at all, but I just felt like, you had to have a Harrison Ford film on there. And if you're going to have any of Harrison Ford's films from the 90s on, you had to have the one that he's so much famous for, and that's Air Force One. That famous line, "Get off my plane!" He's the president, and you have a badass president. He's like beat up bad guys, So it's kind of cool. Gary Oldman, he's always good as like the bad guy. So we had 7, Air Force One, and then you, of the 2 or 3 kind of movies that are very similar with Nicolas Cage, Con Air, The Rock, and I think there was another one that he did. Oh, Broken Arrow, or
he did Face Off, Con Air, and The Rock.
Yeah, of all those, you liked The Rock better and so we settled on having The Rock on there, and of course it's got Sean Connery, and it's about Alcatraz and San Francisco and all that stuff. And once again, it's a film that's Jerry Bruckheimer, Michael Bay type movie. I mean, these movies are so obvious when you see and you know who the director is of these movies. And he worked good with Nicolas Cage in the 90s. Michael Bay did. So The Rock at number 6 we had.
Yeah, and the guys, they put one that I believe we put it at 8. We had a Point Break, and they put it at 7. Knost had it at 6. Rocha had it at 8. What Catherine Bigelow did with that was just, I love it. 2. And, just so many quotable things as far as, especially lines that the great Patrick Swayze did. And obviously, exactly like what the guys said, there's no way Keanu plays a superstar college football player turned FBI agent. That's just such a guilty movie type thing to happen, but it's such a good film as far as the whole cast goes, and Lori Petty in there, and you even get Red Hot Chili Peppers in there and stuff, and it's just so much fun. And speaking of fun, that's their number 6. It's the definition of a fun movie. It's Bad Boys. Dan, what do you think of Bad Boys, real quick? Because neither of us had it on our list. I had it in my honorable mentions.
So did I. I had it, I think, at number 11. So if you would have counted back 11 to 15 in my honorable mentions, I just am not I know it's an iconic movie and everybody loves it. I'm just not a fan. I like Will Smith, but I'm not a fan of Martin Lawrence. And I just think he drags the movie down for me. But I like Will Smith, and I like the direction, and I like that sort of stuff. But and I know a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people love it. I'm just not a big fan of it. As much a fan of it as I was some of these other movies that aren't even on our list because we had a compromise.
Yeah, and I'm the exact same way. It made my 11 spot. Knost didn't have it at on his list at all. Rocha had it at the 2 spot, which just shows. I mean, he's one of the, just like Josh McCouga, one of those that just loves that film, and it's understandable. It's such a fun film. It's just, for me, the ones that we put on our fan top 10 and also the ones that I put on my actual top 10. I love them just that much more, and I think I revisit them more often. But I definitely, just like you, understand that passion for it. Dan, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone what we had at 5 now?
Yeah, we have a really good movie, and we chose this one. I believe both of us had this on our you had it at 7 and I had it at 5, and I think we could have chosen Die Hard 2. We both chose Die Hard with a Vengeance because we thought, obviously, we both had the same mindset of we thought it was a better film than Die Hard 2. And it damn sure is. I mean, the villain, Jeremy Irons, the brother of Hans Gruber, and then you have the team up between John McClane and Zeus, played by Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, Sam Jackson is fantastic in this movie. Bruce Willis, what can I say? But yeah, of the two, I would definitely go with, you had to have one of the diehards on your list if you're going to do top 10 action films. So I think we chose very well, Dylan, to have Die Hard with a Vengeance on our top 10 at number 5.
Yeah, and I completely agree. In fact, it was actually funny listening to Knost talk about it, because he put Die Hard 2, I believe, at 9 or 8. And then he even mentions he liked Die Hard with a Vengeance. It's more fun. He liked it a bit more. So I was expecting it to even make the list, and it didn't even make his list. Rocha didn't have it at all. But yeah, I completely agree. It's such a good film. It's one that you can revisit over and over and over again. For the top 10s, number 5, they put The Rock. We had discussed this as far as our list goes. Rocha had it at 4. Or I'm sorry, Rocha had it at 6. Knost had it at 4. And it's one of those. I believe you left it off your list, right, Dan?
Yeah, I chose Con Air on mine instead.
Yeah, and for me, it's that just like Rocha had mentioned, such a memorable line of winners go home and fuck the prom queen. It's such a good film. Just like Bad Boys is for Rocha, that passion for me for The Rock, it's right there. It's just it's so much fun. I mean, pretty much all these films on that list are exactly that. This was one of the most fun I had making the list, and definitely the hardest, surprisingly, out of all the lists that we've done. Dan, what is our fan number 4?
Well, you had this at number 5, and I had it at number 4, but we settled on putting it at number 4, and that's The Crazy Bus Ride with Keanu Reeves. It seems like Keanu Reeves is making a lot of these movies on our list. I think this is going to make our second time with Keanu Reeves on our list. We got one more to come. Yeah, we got Speed. It's just such a crazy movie. You got what's his face, Dennis Hopper. Don't let the bus go under 50, and they're going out doing all this crazy stuff. And Sandra Bullock is on there, and then they try to do it again with Speed on the boat, and it sucked. Speed on the boat sucked compared to the original Speed. So it shows that you can only capture a lightning in a bottle once, and that's Speed, and that's why it's on our list at number 4. Such a great movie. I love that movie as a kid.
Yeah, and actually, it was funny because our number 4 matches up with the guy's number 4, which was Speed. Knost had it at 7. Rocha had it exactly at 4. Yeah, and completely agree with what you said. And Dennis Hopper, he's so good as the villain in it. And you can almost relate to him. You can understand this is just a guy who just got screwed over, and this is why he's doing this. And just what Bullock does in that, just humanizing basically such an outlandish situation, making it kind of real personal for all of us. You get even all the bus riders in there, and then you get what's his name, Joe Morton as the captain. He has one of the best lines, I think, in all of it, when they're trying to figure out the plans, trying to get the passengers back, and he's trying to find out all the plans, and just says, just starts yelling at everyone. He's like, "You're all fired! You're all fucking fired!" It's so good. It's such a good line, and every time it cracks me up. Dan, what do we have at number 3?
And I want to let you know that this is what I meant by Dylan and I. We're a lot alike when it comes to our movie likes, because we've done now this show. This is our 3rd episode of the show, and so many times have we had our movies that we agree on something. We didn't have that much bickering back and forth about what should be on our list and what shouldn't be back. And in our list, 3, 2, and 1 are exactly the same. That tells you how similar our likes are. And you're going to have a couple Schwarzenegger films. The 80s was a great decade for Schwarzenegger, but the 90s continued his dominance at the box office and with such great action films. And True Lies, James Cameron. I mean, I don't know what to say about this movie. It's just such a great. Jamie Lee Curtis, the Scream Queen herself, she gets in there and she teams up with Schwarzenegger, and it's just such a good movie. I mean, you can't have an 90s action movie list without having True Lies on there. It's just so Hal Rudnick, iconic, iconic. It is. True Lies is iconic. What can I say?
Yeah, and I completely agree. That was definitely one that I'm glad we had it in the same spot, because I was really thinking about it. I was like, I even had it at one point. I had it at number 2, and I was like, oh man, even at 3, I'm gonna have to fight for this thing. And just hearing that you had it as soon as you listed off your list, it was awesome. And you guys can, like I said, you can go check that out on the other video. It's going to be the behind the scenes on 90s action films, where we discuss that, and it's it was funny. As soon as I heard exactly what he had at 3, 2, and 1, it was just big old smile on my face because it was like, all right, well those are always the hard ones to figure out, and those luckily we had the same spot. As for the guys, they put The Hunt for Red October at number 3. This was one that Knost had at number 3. Rocha actually left off. Another John McTiernan film popping up on this list, just like another Schwarzenegger film on our list. Yeah, and it's the Tom Clancy, the Jack Ryan storyline. What did you think of this movie, Dan? And what did you think of the guys putting it at number 3?
I love the movie, and I just think it's more of a like a Cold War kind of drama type thing, more so than an action movie. When you have two people talking on a submarine, and the whole movie takes place basically on a submarine, that's not an action movie to me. You could pretend like you're going to press the button and fire missiles, and there's some missiles going back and forth between two submarines, but that's more of dramatic. They use dramatic license for that. To me, that's not action. And I don't know why they had that on their list as a 90s action movie. I love the movie. Don't get me wrong. I love Denzel Washington. I love Gene Hackman. But to me, it's not an action movie, a 90s action movie. Just like Heat, I don't think was a 90s action movie. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and like I said, where I was putting my list together, it was one of those. I'm a big fan of all those guilty movies and stuff like that, and for me, it didn't match up in the guilty movies, obviously, and it didn't quite top those the best of the actual 90s action ones for me. So just couldn't make it. It made my honorable mentions. Just couldn't quite make it on the actual list, though. Why don't you go ahead and tell the fans, though, what we have at number 2, Dan?
Well, both of us, once again, we agreed on. I actually had this at number 1, and then I switched the last minute the other day, and I said, you know what? Sometimes I write chicken scratch, and so I have to rewrite my list out again and much neater than I originally put it at. So the second time when I wrote my list, I said, I'm going to put this at number 2 because I just can't help but put this other one at number 1. I mean, it's the epitome of 90s action films. And so I put The Matrix. I mean, if you have a list of 90s action films with the slow motion action and the just, I don't know if was the highway thing, was that in The Matrix, or was that one of the
That's in the second one.
Okay, but that was a great scene too. But there's so many just, the battle with Mr. Smith, played by Hugo Weaving. I mean, he's one of the greatest villains, I think, in movie history. I mean, Carrie-Anne Moss, and of course, Neo is one of the all-time great movie action hero characters. Once again, this is the third time we got Keanu Reeves on our list. But yeah, I love. There's so many just great things about The Matrix. I mean, even though it has a science fiction aspect to it, it's still a 90s action movie.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you know what? Why don't you go ahead and tell the fans our number 1? And we can go ahead and just discuss it back and forth, because we basically, as far as the guys go, they had well, actually, you know what? I'll go ahead and tell you. Our number 1 is obviously Terminator 2, Judgment Day. They put that at 2. Knost had it at 1. He had The Matrix at 2, just like what we did. Rocha had The Matrix at 1. So they basically just flip-flopped ours. Yeah, basically just to add on what you said for the Matrix part, just to kind of finish up that. Yeah, I completely agree. And it was such an original idea as far as what it did and the camera work that it did, the special effects that it did, and it completely changed the game for cinema. And so it's understandable why they put it at 1. And it was one of those, like I said, I had mentioned in our behind the scenes, I actually had it at one point at 8. And as I was writing the list, I just thought, no, it can't be 7. It can't be 6. And it made it up to my number 2, made it up to Dan's number 2. That's why we locked it in there. But going on to the guys' number 2, and obviously our number 1, that's Terminator 2. And, Schwarzenegger popping up on here again. I absolutely just love this movie. As far as what it did for, you know, especially for being a sequel, it's a completely different sequel. You know, it's not the same type of. The first film's almost like, you know, this horror film. This is the action part, as far as the action horror, where the other one was more of a horror action movie. You know, James Cameron coming back to direct. Obviously, Linda Hamilton redoing Sarah Connor, and Robert Patrick just knocking it out of the park, being even more frightening than the, you know, as a T-1000. And Joe Morton, you know, same guy from Speed as the captain who threw off that line, coming in as Miles Davis, you know, the creator of Skynet and everything like that. So, Dan, what do you have to say about you know, our number one?
I mean, Terminator 2. You know, I'm sure we're going to get to top 10 sequels sooner than later, and I think this movie is such a great movie. It really gives credibility to sequels. You know, very rarely do you have sequels. I would say The Godfather Part 2, Empire Strikes Back, and T2, maybe Aliens. There's your 4 greatest sequels of all time. And when you put a movie in that company of those other 3 movies, you know it's a great movie. And this is Robert Patrick's very first movie he ever did. Now you see him everywhere. You know, you see him in all kinds of TV shows and all kinds of movies. But he didn't look as young. He didn't look as fast. He didn't look like he could run like he did back then. And still to this day, that special effects, I think Cameron has used it twice. I believe he used it in T2 and he used it in The Abyss. I think, right? Am I right about that, Dylan?
Yes.
In fact, we're liquidizing of a person or liquidizing of something. Nobody has ever done that since. No one's ever been able to capture that essence of how you can liquidize something. And if that wasn't something that could be bought, if you can't buy that villain being able to morph into whatever it was going to morph into, that movie falls apart completely. And you know, Schwarzenegger is Schwarzenegger. He's gonna sell you. He'll sell you a box of popcorn for $20, and you'll buy it because that's what Schwarzenegger does. The guy is a salesman, and if he isn't such a great salesman, we wouldn't have paid all the money we did all these years to go to his movies and buy them on Blu-ray and DVD and all this stuff. And you know, after he's been the governor, not so much, but. Yeah, I mean, Terminator 2. James Cameron was just on fire back in the 90s and in the 80s, and I loved that movie. I couldn't put anything else at number one. In my opinion, that was easily and obviously the number one action film of the 90s.
Yeah, you know, and that was one of those where, you know, just like Knost and Rocha did, I could completely see if you had put it at, you know, number 2 and put Matrix at 1. But I was so happy when you said it was your number 1 as well. It was just one of those like, all right, that's one less thing I got to fight about. So Dan, why don't you go ahead and tell the fans some of your honorable mentions, if you want to expand upon some of those points, and you know what just missed the list.
Yeah, I had Mission Impossible at number 10 on my list. That we compromised, and that missed the list. I wish we would have had that on there because I think Tom Cruise deserved to be on the list at least once. And I mean, the first Mission Impossible is just very rarely does a franchise get better. I think you could say Star Wars and the Fast and Furious are the very few franchises that get better as they go along. And Mission Impossible is the third. So I loved Mission Impossible. I also had Bad Boys, which, you know, I put it on there because I like Will Smith. And in the 90s, he was on fire. He was on fire. Everything he did was gold in the 90s. He couldn't do anything wrong back then. And I had The Rock in my honorable mentions. I had Die Hard 2. And a movie that I'm surprised that nobody had. Very, very, very strange to me that nobody had Armageddon on their top 10 action movies of the 1990s. I mean, this is one of the strangest anomalies. And I had it in my honorable mentions, and I also had Point Break in my honorable mentions. I mean, Armageddon. I mean, it's just like, wow. I mean, if you would have polled 10 other people, they would probably all have Armageddon on their list. So it's kind of odd that none of us had Armageddon on our list.
Yeah, and I believe that, you know, it made my honorable mentions. It made Rocha's honorable mentions. If I remember correctly, Knost wasn't such a big fan of it, and I believe they're going to have a future argument as far as that goes. But for my honorable mentions, you know, I had Con Air, I had Air Force One, Mission Impossible, Hunt for Red October, Bad Boys. One of them that had yet to get mentioned, or a couple of them, Desperado. You had Cliffhanger, which I, you know, such a guilty movie pleasure. You know, they just did that on Guilty Movie Pleasure. That was a fun one to listen to. Blade, Under Siege, Die Hard 2, and Heat. You know, all those at one point had made my list, and just going back and forth. You know, I think I agonized over this list for like 30 minutes to an hour, just figuring out what even just makes the top 10, and then trying to order them. You know, put them in the actual 10 order. It was just, this was a hard list for me, because I, you know, grew up in that age and experienced all of them, you know, some of my first films. And it was really hard to cut all these down. So Dan, you know, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Why don't you go ahead and tell the fans where they can find you at?
You can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. I'm also, like I mentioned in a previous show, I'm the host of the Profiles After Show. We take what Scott Mance and Alicia Malone does, and we do our own thing. And Dylan's been on that show, and that's really is my just love. I just love doing that Profiles After Show, watching all these old movies. From last week, we did Robert Redford, and I got to watch 12 Robert Redford movies. I can't say because it has not been announced what the next one is, but I'm already in the process of watching movies of our next Profiles After Show person. And I'm also an admin on the Best Damn Movie Show. That's a show that I do with my good friend down here in Florida, Vanilla Spada. And our podcast, you can find that on SoundCloud. Phase 2, episode 1 and 2 of the Best Damn Movie Show are on the Best Damn Movie Show Facebook page. And just go on there and listen to our podcast. We talk about movies, news, reviews, all the stuff hopefully everybody out there likes.
There you go. And, you know, as far as the guys go, please do go follow Matt Knost at Matt Knost on Twitter, Facebook, everything like that. John Rocha at The Rocha Says on Twitter. You can find him at John Stephen Rocha on Facebook. The Top 10 does have a Facebook page, not the Top 10 After Show, but the actual Top 10. And that's going to be at the Top 10 Podcast. That's at Facebook. You know, go to YouTube page on SK Podcast. That's where the guys do their Top 10, the actual show itself. Hit them up on Twitter at Top 10 Show. Basically, pretty much anywhere Top 10 or Top 10 Podcast, Top 10 Show, you'll be able to find the guys there. I do run the Top 10 Facebook page. I also run the Box Office Breakdown page. One of the admins on Schmoville. And you can find me at Dylan E55 on Facebook, Twitter, all the good things like that. And also a very special shout out to Christian Harloff for, you know, he's the reason we came up with this new idea on how to relate it more to the actual show. Tossing ideas back and forth, and it was really helpful for us. And, you know, hopefully you guys like the show, and hopefully it turns out good. So that's going to be us signing off. Hopefully join us next week when we find out. You know, we find out just as you guys do. As soon as the show comes out, we don't find out ahead of time. So it's a lot of scrambling, a lot of fun to do some of these research, do some of the actual putting the list together. So join us next time. Bye-bye, guys.